You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we review the second test between Sri Lanka and Australia from the Galle International Stadium. It's the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, and let's get started. Let's have a look at the match summary from the second test between Sri Lanka and Australia from the Galle International Stadium. Australia batted first and made 364 all out in their first innings. Smith top scored with 145 not out. Jayasuriya took 6 wickets for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka in their first innings were all out for 554. Chandimal top scored with 206 not out, and Stark took 4 wickets for Australia. Australia in their second innings were bowled out for 151. Labuschagne top scored with 32, and Jayasuriya took 6 wickets for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka won by an innings and 39 runs to draw the series at 1-1, and Pradaf Jayasuriya was named man of the match. What were the key moments and key factors from the second test between Sri Lanka and Australia? Sri Lanka's bowling to dismiss Australia for 364 in their first innings to keep Australia below 400. Sri Lanka's batting to score 554 in their first innings to get a crucial first innings lead of 190 runs to put Australia under pressure. Sri Lanka's bowling to dismiss Australia for 151 in their second innings. Those were the key moments and key factors from the second test at the Galle International Stadium. Let's have a look at both teams' performances in this second test at the Galle International Stadium with both bat and ball. We'll start with Sri Lanka and their batsmen. Nissanka 6, Kurakna 86, Kusal Mendes 85, Matthews 52, Chandimal 206 not out, Kamindu Mendes 61, and Dick Weller 5. That's how the Sri Lankan batsmen went about things in this second test against Australia. I thought Sri Lanka's batting in this second test match was much better than the first test match. Sri Lanka's batting in the first innings was good, and they were able to score 554 runs, which gave them a crucial first innings lead of 190. And that was very important for Sri Lanka to win this test match. In the end, they were able to win the test match by an innings and 39 runs. The partnerships of 152 for the second wicket between Kurakna and Kusal Mendes, 83 for the fourth wicket between Matthews and Chandimal, 133 for the fifth wicket between Chandimal and Kamindu Mendes, and 68 for the seventh wicket partnership between Chandimal and Ramesh Mendes were all key partnerships for Sri Lanka to ensure that Sri Lanka got a first innings lead of 190 runs in the first innings, which put them into a strong position in this second test match. As I mentioned earlier, a much better batting performance from Sri Lanka. Now, a lot of people criticised them for what happened in the first test match when they got bowled out cheaply in the first test match in the second innings. And they went away, they talked as a batting group on the areas to improve on, and they did improve dramatically. We saw that improvement in this test match. The positives from their batting was that they batted a lot smarter in this second test compared to the first test. They put a high price on their wicket. They were able to build partnerships. They rotated the strike well. Just about all the batsmen faced over 100 balls or more, which showed that they were prepared to bat for long periods of time and spend time at the crease and occupy the crease. I thought Kamindu Mendes on test debut came into this second test match to make his debut. I thought he did well for his 61, batted well for his 61, half century on debut, had a crucial partnership with Chandimal of 133. I thought he was the one positive from Sri Lanka's batting. One of the positives from their batting, I should say. Every batsman had a set plan and executed their plan well. They grinded down the Australian bowlers and made them bowl over 181 overs, which was good to make the Australian bowlers keep coming back to bowl their 4th, 5th and 6th spells and tire them out. And I thought Sri Lanka did that well because you could see that determination. You could see that willingness just to bat time and do the basics well. And that's what Sri Lanka did in this test match. And that's how you bat in test match cricket. This is how you bat in test match cricket. You got to spend time at the crease, wear down the bowlers, make them bowl, as I said before, their 4th, 5th and 6th spells to tire them out. And that's what the Sri Lankan batsmen did. And as I mentioned earlier, just about all of them faced over 100 balls, which was pretty good. Very good batting from Sri Lanka. They definitely took on the lessons from the first test. They spoke about it as a group, as a batting group. What can we get better at? And they certainly did that. So that's great signs for Sri Lanka, that they're learning from their past experiences and failures. And by failing and not doing so well, that often brings success. And we saw that in the second test match. Obviously, the surface helped a lot because the first test pitch was a very difficult pitch to bat on. The ball was turning a lot, whereas the second test pitch here in Galle was pretty much good for batting. The ball didn't turn as much, and the Sri Lankan batsmen were able to get in and get set and score runs. So that was the big difference in the Sri Lankan batting, is that the surface did play a part in them batting well because the ball didn't turn as much as it did in the first test. So overall, their batting was very good. Let's talk about Dennis Chandimal. His 206 not out was a superb innings. He was the standout batsman for Sri Lanka in this test match. His innings was a crucial innings in terms of them winning this test match and getting a crucial first innings lead of 190 runs. He had a bit of luck in his innings, should have been given out, caught behind early on in his innings, but the on-field umpire gave it not out, and Australia wasted all their reviews. So you had to ride your luck in this game. Cricket's all about luck, and for Chandimal, he got off with that caught behind decision, and he'll be saying to himself, right, okay, I've got away with that one, I've got to make it count now, and he did, and he batted well, and he made the most of his second chance to score 206 not out. He became the first Sri Lankan to score a double century against Australia in Test cricket, and it's the highest individual score for Sri Lanka against Australia in Test matches, surpassing Kumar Sangakkara's 192 in 2007 at Hobart. It was a quality knock and an innings he will remember for a long time, Chandimal. So I thought he batted well, and he led the way for Sri Lanka in this batting performance. Overall, it was a good batting performance from the Sri Lankan batsmen. Let's have a look at the Sri Lanka bowlers and their performance in this second test with the ball. Ramesh Mendis took 3 wickets. 3 wickets for Tikshana on debut. 12 wickets for Jayasuriya on debut. And Rajita took 2 wickets. So that's how the Sri Lankan bowlers went about things in this second test. I thought Sri Lanka's bowling in this test match was pretty good. The first innings, they did well to keep Australia to 364 in their first innings and to keep them below 400. Australia were 5 for 298 at the start of day 2, and the Sri Lankan bowlers did well to bowl Australia out. That kept Sri Lanka in the game in this test match, and they were able to bat big and bat long, as we mentioned earlier, in their first innings to score 554 runs, which got them a lead of 190 runs in the first innings. I thought early on in the Sri Lanka's bowling innings in the first innings to Australia, I thought their lines and lengths were a bit off. They were a bit inconsistent with their lines and lengths. They struggled to build pressure with the ball at times, but they were able to get it together with the ball and bowl Australia out in the end for 364, which was a good result. I thought Pradaf Jayasuriya on debut was the standout bowler for the whole test match, but he was definitely the bowler who really did the damage for Sri Lanka in that first innings and really led the way in terms of Sri Lanka bowling Australia out for 364. In the second innings, I thought Sri Lanka's second innings bowling performance was probably their best bowling performance of the series. They had runs to play with. They had a lead of 190 runs, so the bowlers were able to get out there and be attacking and be aggressive. And they seemed more potent and dangerous, the Sri Lankan bowlers. And they really put the pressure on the Australian batsmen. Because of that lead of 190 runs, the Australian batsmen were under pressure. Obviously, Australia knew that they couldn't win the match. They had to bat out 2 days to try and save it. And the Sri Lankan bowlers were able to create pressure on the Australian batsmen by bowling dot balls and then taking wickets at regular intervals, which really caused Australia all sorts. They had a batting collapse, and Sri Lanka were able to get the job done and bowl them out for 151. So I thought overall it was a very good bowling performance from the Sri Lankan bowlers. Let's talk about Pranav Jayasuriya. I thought he was outstanding. On test debut, he came into the side after some players in the Sri Lankan team before the second test tested positive. So Sri Lanka had to make a few changes to their team, and he was one of them who came in to make his test debut. And he took his opportunity and made the most of it. 12 for 177 in the match. That's his match figures that he took for the match. 6 for 118 and 6 for 59. They are by far the best ever match figures on debut by a Sri Lankan bowler in Test cricket. And it's the fourth best match figures in Test cricket by a bowler making their Test debut. He was definitely the standout bowler for Sri Lanka. He really took his opportunity with both hands. He led the way for this inexperienced Sri Lankan attack. And he made his Test debut. And the other Sri Lankan bowlers in this Sri Lankan bowling attack are quite inexperienced. But for someone to come in on Test debut to really lead the way for their team, playing their first Test match, was a brilliant effort. And he really did well to get this victory for Sri Lanka. And by far, he deserved his 6 wickets in both innings because he bowled very well. Let's talk about the other bowlers quickly. I thought Rajita bowled well for his 2 wickets. He chipped in with a couple of wickets there. Ramesh Mendes did okay for his 3 wickets. Tikshana on debut did well to take 3 wickets on Test debut for him. Obviously noted as more of a ODI and a T20 bowler. But hopefully for him, he can start making a regular appearance in the Test side for Sri Lanka, because he can definitely cause some problems with some batsmen, especially with that current ball he bowls. He can definitely bamboozle batsmen. So I thought he did okay on debut. So overall, it was a good bowling performance from Sri Lanka. And overall, it was a good team performance from Sri Lanka to bounce back, to win this second Test match, and to draw the series at 1-1. Let's have a look at Australia's team performance with both bat and ball in this second Test at the Galle International Stadium. We'll start with their batsmen. Khawaja, 37 and 29. Warner, 5 and 24. Labuschagne, 104 and 32. Smith, 145 not out and 0. Head, 12 and 5. Green, 4 and 23. And Carey, 28 and 16 not out. And that's how the Australian batsmen went about things in this second Test. I thought Australia's batting in this Test match was a bit of a mixed bag compared to the first Test match. Their batting in the first innings, they batted well to get to 364 in their first innings. Key contributions from Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne, both making centuries, were the key for Australia reaching that 364 first innings score. The partnerships of 55 for the second wicket between Khawaja and Labuschagne, 134 for the third wicket between Smith and Labuschagne, and 77 for the sixth wicket between Smith and Carey were all key partnerships for Australia. Australia had a golden opportunity to score more runs and get over 400 plus runs in the first innings of this Test match. They started day 2 at 5 for 298, and they lost 5 wickets in quick time and had a mini batting collapse. That's where Australia missed a trick, and as we know now, that 364 wasn't enough as Sri Lanka scored 554 and gained a crucial first innings lead of 190 runs. And from that moment on, Australia's chances of winning this Test match and the series were dashed pretty quickly. And they missed a trick there, Australia. They should have got more runs than 364. Unfortunately, they lost those 5 wickets on day 2 very early, and that's probably what cost them in terms of winning this Test match and winning the series. So we move on to the second innings, and the second innings was not a good batting performance. There's nothing much to say about it. It was pretty poor. Australia were up against it from the start. You know, when you're trailing by 190 runs to make Sri Lanka bat again, it was always going to be an uphill task for Australia to try and win this Test match and try and set a total or a target for Sri Lanka to chase down in the last innings. It was never going to happen. It was always going to be tough. But if Australia applied themselves on a pitch that wasn't really doing much, as we saw in the Sri Lankan innings, then they could have done something special and could have win this Test match if they did apply themselves and batted for time. And you never know. anything could happen in cricket, as we know, but that wasn't to be the case. Just like the first innings, where they lost those 5 wickets in quick time, they had another batting collapse. And Australia had a batting collapse again, and were bowled out for 151 inside 41 overs. They got off to a good start, with Warner and Khawaja adding 49 for the first wicket, but as soon as Warner got out, the collapse happened pretty quickly again. They lost wickets at regular intervals, didn't build partnerships at all. The pressure was the main factor here, because being 190 runs behind on the first innings, the third innings batting was always going to be precarious and put Australia under pressure, and that's what happened. That pressure was too much for Australia to handle, and they collapsed under the pressure. Nothing much to add on to that, really. I thought it was a poor performance in the second innings, and it was very frustrating in the first innings that Australia had a golden opportunity to try and bat Sri Lanka out of this match. Unfortunately, they could not grab that opportunity with both hands. They lost those 5 wickets quickly. They got 364, which was never going to be enough. You need 400, 450, and first innings runs are crucial in the subcontinent, and that's where Australia went wrong. Sri Lanka were able to get the first innings lead, and from that moment on, Australia were behind in the match. So nothing much to say about the batting. It was pretty much a big spag, as I mentioned earlier, and pretty disappointed. Australia will be disappointed in the way they batted, especially in the second innings, and they'll be very disappointed not to make the most of their first innings, because as we know in Galle, first innings runs are very key, and we saw that from Sri Lanka. They were able to get big first innings runs, get a big first innings lead, put the opposition under pressure, and were able to win the test match. So overall, it was a poor batting performance from Australia in this second test match. Let's have a look at the Australian bowlers and their performance in this second test with the ball. No wickets for Labuschagne, no wickets for Head, no wickets for Green, 4 wickets for Stark, a wicket for Cummins, 2 wickets for Lyon, and 3 wickets for Swepson. That's how the Australian bowlers went about things with the ball in this second test. Australia had a tough time of it with the ball in this second test match. On a pitch that wasn't like the first test and not doing much, they struggled to take wickets at regular intervals. Sri Lanka's batsmen applied themselves well on this surface and grinded the Australian bowlers down and made them bowl 181 overs. Australia did well at the start of the Sri Lankan innings to keep the runs down and apply pressure to the Sri Lankan batsmen. But once the Sri Lankan batsmen got in and set on a pitch that was pretty good for batting, Australia didn't have any answers. They tried just about everyone, but found it tough to take wickets. They couldn't keep or sustain that pressure, and therefore leaked a 190-run lead on the first innings, which pretty much sealed the fate for Australia in this test match. And obviously Australia lost the test match by an innings and 39 runs. So it was very tough going for the Australian bowlers in this second test match. You've got to give credit to the Sri Lankan batsmen. They really showed a lot of resilience and resolve, determination. They didn't want to give up their wickets cheaply. And as I mentioned, this pitch for the second test match was pretty good for batting. Didn't really turn as much as it did in the first test. So as a batsman, you could feel comfortable facing the spinners because you know that the ball's not going to really turn as much, unlike the first test where every ball had your name on it. The second test match, the spinners weren't really that threatening at times. The ball wasn't really turning sharply as it was in the first test. So as a batsman, if you got in and got set, it was very hard to dislodge the batsman and get them out and get wickets on a regular basis. So Australia found that tough. What Australia didn't do well with their bowling is that they wasted their DRS reviews, and that's a big talking point from the Australian bowling performance, is that they didn't really use the DRS wisely. They didn't do themselves any favours, Australia, by wasting reviews and missing chances. They wasted reviews left, right and centre because they were frustrated. They wanted to take wickets. Pat Cummins said, okay, we'll go upstairs for a review. Turns out they lost the reviews, and that came back to bite them big time. Dinesh Chandimal should have been out early in his innings, caught behind. The on-field umpire didn't give it out. Australia couldn't review it because they wasted all their reviews. Look what happened. Chandimal went on to make 206 not out. And Chandimal was the big wicket. If Australia got him out, then Australia would have got Sri Lanka out for less than 500. That's looking at it in hindsight. but you can't waste reviews. And that's something that Australia have struggled with over the years with DRS, is wasting reviews. So they need to come up with a new method in terms of how they go about DRS reviews. And I think Australia need to talk to a former or current cricket umpire to get some tips and advice on how to go about decision making. As an umpire myself, there is a method that we umpires follow in terms of giving decisions effectively. And if Australia, take that initiative, speak to a former umpire or a current umpire, then they can get better at their decision making in terms of DRS. And I'm surprised that many teams don't even do that when it comes to DRS. Australia can be the first team to do that if they take that initiative, because if they do that, I think they'll be much better with their decision-making process when it comes with DRS and not wasting reviews left, right and centre, because you can't afford to waste reviews. You've got to use them wisely, and Australia did not use them wisely in this second test. I thought the Australian bowlers did well. They stuck at it. It was tough going. I thought Mitchell Starc bowled well for his 4 wickets. He got the third new ball to swing. He got a few wickets, so I thought he did pretty well. Pat Cummins, he toiled hard for his 1 wicket. Nathan Lyon bowled over 64 overs. That's a lot of overs. 2 for 194 and 64 overs. Nathan Lyon's a workhorse. He, toiled hard. He got a couple of wickets. Mitchell Swepson, I was very impressed with Mitchell Swepson. 3 wickets for him. Great to see him taking wickets and really improving in subcontinental conditions. So the Australian bowlers did well. They toiled hard. It was tough going. But in the end, they were able to find a way to take 10 wickets. So overall, it was an okay bowling performance from Australia. Overall, it was a disappointing performance from Australia. They had a golden opportunity to win this test series. Unfortunately, they couldn't capitalise on key moments with the bat and the ball in this second test match. After losing the first test, Sri Lanka have bounced back well to win the second test by an innings and 39 runs, and to draw the series at 1-1. Australia would be disappointed that they didn't win this test match. Unfortunately, they couldn't capitalise on key moments, whereas Sri Lanka did and were able to win this second test. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Until next time, keep safe, and bye for now.